Yeah, we'd love to hear more about like the process. Like, is there a point when you know this is we're going to drop a hit here? It's going to be we know it, you feel it, and we'd love to just to get the view from the beginning to the end. Like, how does it start? Like, is it like you're walking down the street and you're like, bang, I want to go through this?
I mean, there's times where you just know, but then what I always tell people is there's also that timing when you I say you call it you hand the baby over, right? You're handing you know you have this great song, but then the artist records it. You're like, oh my god, this is a hit. This could be a hit, right? You're saying that in your mind, and then you hand the baby over, and they either drop it and mess up and take a hit and drop it, and they don't time it right. They don't put the marketing spend behind it, whatever the case may be, or what I call the planets align. The planets just line up, and it's the right artist with the right song at the right time, and it just goes. You know what I mean? And now we're seeing that even more in the new school model of social media and digital platforms and DSPs. It's a totally different type of synergy than it used to be with the traditional major label model, if that makes sense. Because back then I felt like you could control it a little more, because if you were Sony and you had Michael Jackson as your flagship artist, you could go to Kiss FM and go, if you want the next Michael Jackson single, you got to play the Beyonce single, right? Before Beyonce was big, right? So they could have that leverage, and if they pumped a few million behind it, it would at least break at least into the top 20 enough, and then if it researched, you're going all the way. But they could still get it close enough to see if it was going to be a hit. But I digress. Going back to the creative process, I think it's different every time, right? Because sometimes I'll have almost a fully fleshed out idea when an artist walks in, and then we just finish it out. Sometimes I have nothing, and I just bring them in, and we talk like this for an hour, and we just get to know each other, and I'm like, what are you going through right now? And then they might just say something, and I'm like, that's it. Like, we did one for Anastasia. It was myself and Anastasia and a guy named Toby Gadd, who's insane. He did like If I Were a Boy, If You Were a Boy for Beyonce, like John Legend, all of them, huge hits, right? He's a German guy. He's hilarious. So we're in the room and we're talking, and she said something about she's had breast cancer multiple times, multiple scares, and the last time they had to like literally go in her muscle in her back and wrap the muscle around, right, to like recreate her breast structure, and she's like, I call them my broken wings, and I was like, there's the title, like that's your concept. And then it wrote itself in like an hour. Like once we had that concept, Toby ran to the piano, started playing chords, and we were like, and it just came together. Right. So and then you just know, right? Like I said, at that point, there's no second guessing. Right. But then there's other times, like I think the first one I did for Monica, Just Another Girl, myself and Lindy Robbins and Carson and Joachim, they gave us a track vibe. Which was just basic, because at that point I wasn't really producing, I was just writing, and it was just this really cool, like kind of mid-tempo groove, and I was at the gym, and I was listening to it, and I was like, oh. And I just immediately, a couple of the lines just came into my brain, and I told Lindy, I was like, let's get in the studio, and we knocked the demo out really fast, and pitched it, and then it just went. You know what I mean? Yeah, so that was another totally different process. Right. There's a record I have on Armada with a DJ named Gattuso that is called When in Rome, and that thing's, between all the versions, is at like 60 million now. But that was a totally different process. That was one where I had been sitting on that title in my phone for like 2 years, and I was in with my friends Kimo and Rick, and I was like, I have this idea. I'm not sure if it's cheesy or not. And I just had like 2 of the first lyric lines written. I didn't even have a melody, and I just read it off. And Kimo's like, dude, that's it, right? And he just starts humming a melody, and immediately Rick started playing guitar chords. And then that one, honestly, I'm not exaggerating, was written in like 45 minutes. And all we did was record down guitar and vocal. And then we fired that off. Gattuso's manager heard it, and he's like, this is a smash, let's go. And then that one came together, again, really fast. But that one started from a title. Right, so sometimes it starts from a title. I have an artist that I've been developing for about 5 years now named Shab. She's a Persian pop artist. And the whole new batch of stuff that we did for her, because I've learned so much about her at this point, I just kind of went into a creative bubble with my friend Tufik, who lives in France. We just started exchanging ideas of what I thought would be a great body of work for her. So we did like 5 or 6 tracks that were just custom for her. And then we went in, and then my friend Jay Hart, who's an amazing writer, we brought him in to help us write the songs. So again, completely different process, right? We're presenting a body of work of tracks, and the songs, sprouted from that. Because at that point, I already knew so much about her as an artist and who she is as a person that sonically we're able to dial it in. Right. So it's very different. Like I said, sometimes I'll fly to another country. They're like, okay, come over. We're doing a camp. I remember doing a camp there was a boy band called JLS, which is huge in the UK. They play like the O2 Stadium, right? Same one Beyonce would play. Right. And I flew out for a week. We did a bunch of sessions. And the first day I met them, we wrote the song that ended up on the album. You know what I mean?
Right.
In 5 minutes, I was like, I have this concept. It's kind of corny. It's called 3D. And Arishe, who's my buddy who's now my buddy in the group, he's like, this is brilliant, bro. Let's go. Let's write it. And again, it came together super fast. So, and that was one where at that point, that was like 2011 or something. I had been producing. So we got a very rough vocal. Myself, Cutfather, and Jason Gill got the track vibe going. I brought it back to LA, added more backgrounds, fully finished it out. I sent it to them. They added more, sent it to the mix engineer. So sometimes there's multiple steps to get to that final, wave file that gets uploaded now it doesn't get printed anymore. It's now uploaded to DSPs.
Right.
Yeah.
So would love to hear more about like DJing.
Okay.
I remember
Yes.
you DJ'd for us May 2023, and you had everyone jump in. And I remember like being nervous because it was like such a different crowd. Right? We had some old people, we had some young people, we had everything in between. Talk about that. Like, how does it feel to DJ? How do you? What's your process that goes through when you know?
It's
and what are your goals? Like when you're going somewhere, how do you know you're succeeding when you're DJing?
It's interesting, right? Every place you go is going to be different, right? So, and every set is going to be different because I can't play the same set. And sometimes it's about reading the room and the journey of it. So it's like if I'm playing some things and nobody's reacting, I know at that point I have to pivot and play something else. And then sometimes I'll play a set that is similar. So my process usually is I kind of get a gauge. Let's say I'm playing like EDC. I played EDC Vegas 3 times now. So now I kind of know roughly what kind of that vibe is, right? I'm always playing around 2:33 in the morning, which is like the peak time. People are up. Some people are on Molly. Some people are just in a good vibe, right? So honestly, whatever you play, people are probably going to feel it.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm all about like high energy. Because I come from a dance background, I want people to dance, right? As much as I love Afro house and things like that, that's not really me because unless I'm in like Tulum or by a pool, that's not what I want to hear, right? If I'm going out to dance and have some drinks, I just want to feel, I want to dance, right? So yeah, like I said, it just depends. Sometimes I'll be 10 minutes into a set, and I'm like, you know what? Let me just kind of pivot. And I usually have about 150 to 200 songs that I've kind of earmarked for an event, right? So if let's say I'm playing, just a club, I'm headlining a club show, and I'm the headliner at like 1 in the morning. I kind of know it needs to be the most high energy of all the sets that have been played, right? So it's a certain BPM range that I prep. And sometimes that can be a wide. It doesn't have to be just like 124 to 130. It can be like 124 to 140, and I can transition up into like drum and bass or a slightly different feel, right? Or faster like melodic techno. But yeah, it's fun every time because you don't know what to expect. You know what I mean? And sometimes you show up and I would say 30% of the time the equipment is janky. Like you show up and you had a rider and it says what's supposed to be there and it's not what you expected. And at that point, as long as it's somewhat acceptable, I'm still going to play. I'm just going to go in. I'm just going in. I'm going for it. There's only been, I think, one time that I actually would not play, and that was actually ADE in Amsterdam 2 years ago. And I showed up, and I kid you not, it was like these mixers from probably 20 years ago. You had no hot cues, could not recall anything. And then the mixer looked like something out of like the 70s. Like it had knobs on it. It was like a black thing. It looked like it was a Russian black box. So I was like, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I was like, I'm so sorry. It's like, it was a live broadcast. I was like, if this was just a crowd, I'd have no problem. I said, but I'm not comfortable broadcasting a set with my name on it with equipment that I probably won't even be able to like beat match and transition and I just politely passed, and he actually understood. But I think that's one of the only times I've actually said, you know what, I'm not playing, because usually there's a workaround. Usually they'll have an extra deck in the back or a mixer that's working, and then sometimes the FX button is broken or a fader is broken or one of them doesn't even recall your songs, and you just got to go with it and just do your best.
I remember when you did our event, you had very specific requirements.
Yeah.
But you crushed it, and so I was like, you know what? You get some people are comfortable with what they have and what they know, and you did.
And I'm flexible.
I was thankful though because you really had everyone excited and they're like, you did a great job on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So a couple things I'd like to get your opinion on, because
please.
Again, like you've been at the game and really there for a long time.
Yep.
Multiple things I want to touch upon there. First, what's the secret to staying to what you're doing? Because things change really fast, right?
Yeah.
And the business of it too has changed a lot, right? And it seems like you've been able to adapt to the changes with like technology.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear from you on that.
I think so. I'm threatening to write a book at some point, right? Okay. And I'm already banking I'm banking chapters. I'm already like collecting all the info, right? And one of my biggest ones is it's all about the pivot, right? Like people don't understand. They think that you can always just be in this linear journey in your career and in your life. Sometimes you have to be open to the pivot. Like, I don't know if you had these when you were a kid. Did you ever have like the Hot Wheels tracks when you were a kid?
Yeah.
So I kind of feel like I'm at that point in my life now where I have my production songwriting career, I've got my DJ label, I've got my family, and all these things now are running parallel and kind of converging, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So, and now my social media track as well, which is a whole other conversation we can talk about. But I think I've always prided myself on not letting my ego getting in the way and going, all right, this door's not open, but you know what? This door's kind of close to it. Like, let me go through that one and maybe I'll end up at the door I want to be at. Right, so I think that's a huge thing. I think the minute you start assuming that you know everything, even though you've been doing it a long time, that's your demise. You're done. Like I think when you stop adapting and going, ooh, what is this new? And anytime I'm in with a new artist, I'm like, all right, what platform are you on? Like, what's new? Like, what's the new record in the streets that I don't know because I can't be out all the time. I'm a studio rat, right? And I can hear things when I'm out playing, but that's only what I'm going to hear in that small 2 to 3 hour window, right? So I think for me, I pride myself on. I mean, I've always been like trying to stay on the up and up, whether it's AI, whether it's blockchain, whether it's NFTs, whether it's singularity, whether it's, I'm just constantly a student of the game, if that makes sense. So my wife even laughs at me because she'll come in and instead of me watching like TV, I'm watching a YouTube tutorial. Like I'm just constantly trying to be a student of the game, whether that's creativity or that's business. Like you said, I'm just constantly trying to pivot. And also allowing new people to come into my fold. I think some people get so comfortable with the people they're always around, they're scared to like fold in and go, oh, hey, there's this new kid that just moved here from Ohio. He's 17. Do you want to do a session with him? I'm like, send him over. Let's go. Because then I know he's going to be the next guy. And he's going to keep me relevant. But I can also bring my experience and the gloss that I know how to put on a record where we meet right in the middle and it works perfect.
Right.
You know what I mean? So like Tufik, who I've been working with, who's from France, he's in his like early 20s. He's Moroccan and South African, and he lives in France. So the two of us have completely different cultures that clash in a beautiful way, if that makes sense. So our ideas are complementing each other, and we're learning from each other.
Right.
So I think that's key as well. Like collaboration is key. I think the minute people think they know everything or they can do everything, you're done.
You're done, right?
You're done.
What are the biggest changes? Because when I was growing up, my dad was from the 60s. He would say, oh my God, the Temptations, so much better than you, right? But I'm like the same way too now. I'm like, oh my God, like this is so different, right? So in your opinion, what has been the biggest differences you've seen from our generation to now?
So you're talking about not necessarily tech, you're saying like actual like music.
Yeah, actual music. Yeah,
musicality. It's interesting. So I think we get caught up, right, because the nostalgia of it imprints us that our stuff is the best, right? We're like, oh, our hip-hop was the best. Our pop songs were the best. And it doesn't matter if it's your grandparents, your parents, us, my daughter. Everybody thinks theirs is the best, right? So I think for me as a creator, it's super important. I literally will listen to a song 20 times to try to understand. I'm like, why don't I get this? What is it that they like? And sometimes I can figure it out. Sometimes I can't. And I just accept it. I'm like, hey, that's just part of their generation. Maybe it's being fed to them in a certain way, whether it's a trending sound that they're getting on TikTok. They hear it 10 times and it becomes a hit by repetition. Sometimes there's ones that I just think are outright hits. You first listen, you hear it, you're like, and this is a dated reference, but like the minute I heard TikTok by Kesha, I'm like, smash. Wouldn't have mattered if she did it, Britney did it at the time, Katy Perry, whoever was the hottest at that, it wouldn't have mattered because it's just it's a freaking hit. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I think now we live in a different world where a big chunk of it is what's being fed to us. So if something comes up in your feed 30 times, eventually like, oh yeah, I love that song. But you don't necessarily love it. You love it because you've heard it so many times, you just start humming along to it, or you're almost being programmed by it, if that makes sense.
Right.
But yeah, that's one of the biggest changes for me. And it is hard. I think sometimes like I'm like, oh, this mumble rapper sucks, right? And I'm like, shut up, Damon, just go. All right, like Playboy Cardi was one for me. I'm like, I don't get it. And then I just forced myself. It's not my thing, but I forced myself to listen and try to understand why a specific generation loves it. And a lot of times that is just, for me personally, I think it's a sense of belonging, and it's a sense of this is ours. Does that make sense? Like, oh, Playboy Cardi's ours. This is our guy. Your guy's old. Oh, God, J. Cole, he's old. Yeah. You know what I mean? But to us, it's like there's a different bar. But to them, it's the sense of that's theirs. Right. So in other words, that guy's little brother is going to come up and go, Playboy Cardi's garbage. This is my guy. And it's some new guy who looks like a Martian. He's like, we're like, we don't get it, but that's their thing.
Right.
So
right.
I my point being, I just try to embrace it, even if I don't personally like it, and I'm not going to bump it in my car, or I'm not going to play it in one of my DJ sets. I try to embrace it, and sometimes even for me, because when I play live, I like to mash up a lot of genres. It's primarily like a lot of house and tech house, bass house, a little bit of techno. But I also have a ton of stuff that has like hip hop vocals on top of a house beat, just because I love so many different genres. And I think that's also my way of having a little bit of ownership in multiple generations and not just mine.
To be quite honest with you, those have always been some of my favorite sets, though. Like, because I love all the genres that you said, and it's a mark of a good DJ when you can actually mix it
without it sounding crazy.
Without it sounding crazy. So that's so true. You have a beautiful daughter here, Charlie.
Thank you.
Come say hi real quick.
Can you come in and say hi?
So when you had your family, how did that change?
Oh man, from a workflow, if anything, that was the craziest. Like trying to figure out how to balance everything, right? So even now, like it's like I've got my DJ career, I've got my label, I've got my production, I've got my songwriting, but I always make sure I make time for them. So like today it's a Sunday, so I was like, they got to come with me. Like come with me, let's hang out, let's make sure we get to spend some time together. So I think it's really about it's time management. That's probably my hardest thing in life, period. I'll tell anybody. Time management is the hardest because there's so many things I want to do. And it almost keeps me up at night sometimes because I really want to. There's so much I want to accomplish, you know.
Charles, do you want to say anything about having a great father that's been in the industry? Have you learned anything, or?
I don't know. I'm just really happy to have like a fun dad, and like that he's not boring. Because some dads are kind of boring.
Okay.
But I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
Cool.
really lucky to have him as my dad.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Charlie. Damon, you've done so much in social media. Tell us, how have you been able to build such a good following? I see you on TikTok, Instagram, and tell us about that process, what you're thinking through, and some of the things that you decide to put out there.
Yeah, I mean, the funniest part about the ironic part about it is, for a long time, I was very sarcastic about social media. I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. It just feels like extra work. It's so cringy to me. So that's another chapter that will be in my book as well, is embrace the cringe, right? Like, we're too afraid sometimes to like be a little funny and self-deprecating. And that's one thing that I've spent about 2.5 years now. I met my content shooter, Trenton, in 2022, about when I launched the label. And I was like, you know what, I got to do this. I got to build my brand. And I sat with him and for about an hour and just told him my life story. And he's like, all right, I know what to do. Let's go, right? It's going to be DJ-centric, music. It's going to be production, songwriting with humor. So we kind of fine-tuned it. It took about, I would say, about 18 months before I really started seeing a lot of growth. But like, for example, on IG, I started Instagram with maybe 10K followers. Now I'm at 150K. Like, and that's 2.5 years of just grinding it out. And then top of this year, brands finally started coming to me. So I've done collab posts with Autotune, Vocaline, which is Synchro Arts, Avid Pro Tools, Splice, like all these brands that are perfect aligning for me as a DJ and a producer and a songwriter. And then, so I think at that point, maybe top of this year, I was at like, I don't know, like 80K or something, right? And then Charlie and I did the Gen Alpha series. And that was just kind of a funny thing that I was just trying, right? So I'd seen a video of, I think, two sisters that were like both like 10, and they're saying the words, like the Gen Alpha word and the word that other generations would say. And I said to Trent, I was like, what if we did a video where like I'm this generation and Charlie's kind of schooling me on Gen Alpha slang? And he's like, oh, let's try it. And my wife was here. She was sitting in the back. She's like, I don't think this is going to work. This is terrible. And I'm like, all right, well, let's just try it, right? So we go to sleep. We wake up the next day, and it's at like 1 million views. Wow. Then it's at like 10 million views. Then it's at like 20 million views. Then I call my friend at Meta. I'm like, dude, when would you consider something viral? He's like, it came to me on my For You page. He's like, it's viral. And I was like, shit. And so now we're at like 83 million on part 1 on Instagram. And like and another 20 something on part 2. So we did 3 videos, and they're all collectively at about 130 million on TikTok and Instagram. So that now has only added and grown my fan bases on both channels. And the beautiful part was even though it's kind of not related, it was related because the hook at the top said, me asking my Gen Alpha daughter, how to work with a Gen Alpha artist. So right. The key is, even if it's outside of my scope as a producer, a DJ, or a songwriter, or like a music executive, whatever, however you want to word that, it ties in somehow. It's music adjacent, if that makes sense.
Right.
So that's what I always tell people. I think like like I said, I'm in no way, shape, or form like this huge influencer, but it's from in my little microcosm, it's working, right? And
Right.
I think that's what it is. I think being consistent with it and kicking the door down, especially if you know that that's what's right for you. So in other words, if you're a painter and you've got to present your paintings, but maybe you can add a sense of humor. Maybe you can have something in there that has to do with painting, but like, paint by numbers and you're doing math. Like, I don't know. There's
Right.
I think there's creative ways to put your brand and what you do out to the world without everything. For example, if you just saw me playing out as a DJ all the time and trying to look cool with sunglasses on, everybody can do that. Like, who cares?
Everyone likes to laugh.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. And for some people, it's not their brand. I get it. For some people, it's not. Just for me, that's what works.
Right.
And I'm embracing it. And I think it's the same thing with anybody else. It's if the authenticity is there, it will connect at some point if you're consistent, right? Like
Right.
it just takes time. I mean, I look at I commend Sabrina Carpenter. She's been working at it for 10 years. People don't realize this is album 7. Everybody's, oh my God, Sabrina Carpenter, she's blowing up. I'm like, no, she is, but she's been doing it. She's been putting the work. She's like 14 years old. So, I mean, there's a lot of Charlie XCX. Oh my God, Brat Summer, she's huge. I didn't know who she was. I'm like, she's been putting shit out since 2009. But she stayed consistent and just kept doing the work.
So what you just said, like it's just like you have to out hustle people, like you said,
Yep.
like outwork them. And
Yep.
All right, Damon. So last question for those who are now just coming up in the game, and they see what you've done. What advice do you have for them?
Man, I mean, I think the first thing I'll tell anybody is it's all about work ethic. Like, work ethic trumps talent, in my opinion. So you can be the most talented person on the planet, but if you're not going to put the work in, it's never going to connect, in my opinion. So, like, that's why we see so many people now. Again, I think I said it earlier. It's like, we're like, how did this guy get here? You know, and you're like, he probably just worked his ass off. Like, he's probably a cool guy. He networks with people. He gets it. You know what I mean? So, but I think it's a perfect storm when you can be talented and have the work ethic, right? And I think the thing I'll also tell, especially new young people that just moved here, I'm like, don't get jaded. Like, don't let all the no's get to you, because with every no, you're that much closer to a yes. As cliche as that sound, I feel like it's for me, it's been so true. So now, yeah, of course, is it a knife sometimes when I send something, like, I'm so excited, I'm like, oh yeah, this is perfect for so-and-so, and they're like, we're gonna politely pass, and I'm like, oh, damn. And it's a blow to your ego, but then I'm like, all right, that just means I'm that much closer to the next big thing.
Sometimes that trumps talent.
Yep. And and like I said, I truly believe that if you're authentic, whatever that version of authenticity is for you, it will resonate with people. You know what I mean? I think in huge ways.
Awesome. Okay, Damon. So you're about to drop some cool stuff coming up. Tell us what you're working on, what you're dropping, and how people can reach out to you and all that type of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I have a current single out right now with Morgan Page called Maybe It's Over. I'm super excited about. On November 1st, I have another one dropping on my label on Brainjack called Vibe Check with Wenzel, who's a massive, hilarious influencer, amazing saxophone player, and Lenny, who's like a kind of a staple in the EDM world as a vocalist. So I'm super excited about that. People can you can pretty much find me anywhere at this point, luckily, like at Damon Sharpe with an E, on pretty much all platforms. I'm active on pretty much all of them. I try to respond to as many comments and as many DMs as I can, because I feel like at this point in my life, that's my duty. I want to, if I can help someone else achieve their dreams, then I'm doing my job. If I can achieve my dreams at the same time, amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, Damon. You're the man.
Yeah.
You're the man.